morning. So for those of you who are in the mood, I'd love to see some faces. It's a little strange to talk to a computer screen with a bunch of black boxes. Yay! So it is nice. I know not everybody is comfortable putting their videos on and being there, but if you are comfortable, it's a much better experience for me when I see real people. So good morning. Good morning. It is lovely to see people here this Sunday morning, this gorgeous, gorgeous, windy Sunday morning here in Minneapolis. I am really, really happy to be here. It's going to be a little different for us to do this together via Zoom. And I don't know everybody's comfort level with Zoom and how much everybody is familiar with it, but I do assume that most of us are getting a lot more fluent with all of these online technologies. So just to get a sense of who is here this morning, it would be lovely if you could just say hello in the chat, if you know how to use the chat. Just introduce yourself, say how you're feeling this morning, what brings you, how you are as we start up here together. It just gives us a little bit more of a sense of community and conversation when we can see some of that. Oh, but you know what? Forget that. Never mind. I take that completely back because Gary explained to me you will not be able to see everybody's chats. So that's not going to work. So here's what we're going to do instead. For the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of us that I can see, hi, I am very delighted that you are willing to be here visually. Any nonverbal gesture of greeting, appreciation, happiness, you know, anything that you would like to send the group, anything that is warmth and connectedness. I love that. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Anything to just have a little bit of human contact through these crazy, crazy screens that we have.
And you should be able to see the chats.
If they're coming in, I don't see them, so it's okay. No worries.
Well, can't we just unmute?
I would love that. Would some people like to just unmute and say good morning? That would be so grounding for me. Hi.
Yeah, I mean, we shouldn't need the chat if we just unmute ourselves.
I think that sounds good. So we'll unmute one at a time. Otherwise, it gets really, really noisy.
And it's hard with the video when I post it on YouTube because people's faces keep popping up in it. But, you know, some people don't want to be seen.
Oh,
yep. So just keep in mind that it is being recorded. And if you do pop on, that you'll be on the video. Does anybody knowing that want to say good morning?
Good morning.
Hello.
Good morning from beautiful Arizona.
How lovely. What's it like in Arizona right now?
Oh, it's been beautiful last couple of days. Really, really. The mornings are just great. 70s, mid 70s. It does get up into the like low 90s, but it's actually beautiful because it's I've been in the hundreds, so it's beautiful.
That's crazy, crazy hot and dry.
Yes,
nice.
yes.
Lovely. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Anybody else want to say good morning?
Hello from Northfield.
Good morning from Northfield. How are you?
Awesome. Good to be here.
Lovely. I'm delighted you're here.
I get to participate.
Great. One more person. No? No one else. Okay. Gary, you can go ahead and mute everybody then, and I'm just going to dive in. So we are here this morning. Okay, so now again, I feel like I'm assuming most of you have heard me speak before or know something about me. How many people on this call, and you can look at the bottom of your screen and it says reactions, and under reactions, just give me a thumbs up if you know who I am and you know about me, because it'll give me a quick sense of who doesn't know anything about me. So just go to reactions, give me a quick thumbs up, because then I can get a quick view of the various people to get a sense of whether I need to do any introduction of myself. It looks like a lot of people did not put their thumbs up, so I am just going to give you, given that, I am going to give you a little bit of background on who I am. So my name is Yvette. I work as a clinical psychologist, teacher, trainer, consultant, coach, writer, speaker, I don't even know what anymore, in Minneapolis. And then my mind goes blank because everything from there gets kind of big, but essentially a lot of the work that I do in the world is dedicated to the evolution of human consciousness, the evolution of compassion and courage on our planet, especially, most especially in times like we're in. And I teach a lot of different modalities. I do a lot of mind-body medicine. I do a lot of nonviolent communication, although I'm more interested in the step that comes after nonviolent communication. So it's a really great foundational skill to internalize, but I teach a little bit more about what do you do when you have that skill online. And I'm going to be talking with you a little bit this morning about the importance of kindness on our planet at this time in the global and national climate that we're all living in. I was born in South Africa. My father was a diplomat. He was a white, patriarchal South African man who grew up on a tobacco farm. And he worked for the white South African government. And he was a product of his times. And I like to just remind people of that because it helps me, and it sometimes helps other people stay more compassionate when you understand that people evolve out of a context that normalizes some things. And so in his context, he was trained to be fairly patriarchal and racist. So my mother, on the other hand, grew up white South African, born and raised in Rhodesia, now Zimbabwe. And her father was a very high up, let's just say, in a banking system, very liberal, educated, progressive family who stood against apartheid growing up. And my mother was a little bit of a social revolutionary. She continues to be quite a social revolutionary today. And she's quite a spitfire. Some of you have met her. She's local here in Minneapolis, and she's a very charismatic, fiery, passionate, intense woman who likes to speak against systems of oppression. And so you can imagine that I grew up between two very extreme polarities in my family. My parents did ultimately get divorced when I was a teenager, and growing up, between two family systems and between two cultural systems and between two ideologies that were so far apart as a child. So for those of you, I'm a Libra, so of course I'm always looking to balance opposites and to bring everything together. And so much of my own life purpose has been about looking for universal human laws that bring us together and that unite us and underneath. And so then I also grew up, I didn't only grow up in South Africa. We lived in Malawi for 4 years. I went to elementary school in Germany. I went to middle school in South Africa during the state of emergency. I went to high school in Beverly Hills. I went to college here at the U of M. I then moved into international education, and I lived in Egypt, and I lived in England, and I've lived in Tucson, Arizona, and I've lived in Bali, Indonesia, and I'm now temporarily, for the next 10 years at least, settled in Minneapolis. So that's what I bring to this work, and that's the perspective that I'm coming from when I want to talk to you today a little bit about the importance of kindness and a little bit about how we orient ourselves for, and I'm going to use this term very lightly, but for goodness, in the face of rising hatred, rising bigotry, rising violence, rising fear, rising polarization all around us. So I'm going to pause there and find out if you have any questions or requests before I go any further. And at that point, just unmute yourself and weigh in.
And if they post on chat, I can see that and I can open their mic.
Okay, great. If you want to write something on chat instead of saying something out loud, you're welcome to do that, and Gary will read it to me.
And I can open their mic too, and if they raise their hand on chat, I can open their mic too.
Fabulous. Thanks, Gary. I appreciate that. Okay, so it doesn't look like anybody is dying to dive in this morning. Okay, then I want to talk a little bit about kindness, and I want to talk about what I was hoping we could do, because I was hoping we would have breakout rooms, but it doesn't look like we can do that this morning. So I'm going to give you a few questions to just think about with yourselves. And I'd like you to remember a time when you have experienced kindness from another human being. Maybe you can bring to mind a time that you've experienced kindness from somebody else. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples from my own life. When I moved into a home in my neighborhood, in the wintertime, I don't have a snowblower. I have a fairly short driveway, but it is still significant when it's cold and filled with snow to shovel it. And multiple times this last winter, different neighbors, and I don't mean the same neighbor, like 3 different neighbors, I came out in the morning and somebody had snowblowed my driveway for me. Now, these aren't even people that I have a relationship with. I've met them once, we've said hello, we've waved. But waking up in the morning and coming downstairs to shovel a driveway and find out that somebody has done it for you is a delightful experience in the middle of winter here in Minnesota. It is very, very delightful. And the piece that struck me this last winter, the winter before that happened as well, but it was one particular neighbor. And then this winter, it was 2 other people kind of joined in. And they know that I'm a single mom at home is what I'm guessing. I make up a whole story about what on earth would inspire somebody to do that. But it left me feeling a sense of community. It left me feeling cared for. It increased my sense of safety in my neighborhood. It increased my sense of being known. And it also increased my sense of trust in the people that are around me. Just that very simple act. It's powerful and it sticks with me. The other thing is, I want to mention about kindness, not only that it impacts you and your community pretty deeply when it's even when it's a very small act, although I actually don't want to say that snow blowing is a small act, it's pretty significant. But the other piece is that kindness is contagious. And in an era where we have a pandemic going on and where we've all become very afraid of contagion, I want to remind you that there are things that are contagious that we probably want to be leveraging, and kindness would be one of them. We want to leverage the contagiousness of kindness. When we see people behaving in kind ways, we tend to be inspired to do similar things. When we see people behaving in violent ways, we tend to become more fearful and more violent ourselves. Even if we don't believe in physical violence, many of us get much more psychologically violent. And what I mean by psychologically violent is judgmental, self-righteous, grandiose, creating enemy images. So when we are looking around ourselves, and we're looking at all of the different things happening in the world that are anything but kind, and we are exposed over and over again to a rhetoric that is hateful, bigoted, strident, aggressive. I'm watching people, I don't watch very often, but when I watch people on television supposedly reporting, and I listen just to their tone of voice, so much of it is scornful, is disrespectful, is impatient, is outraged, indignant. And I want to remind us in a community like this that these are lower quality vibrations and energies and consciousness for us to be coming from. And if we're not aware of it, we run the risk of sinking to that level and amplifying it. And what we do not want to be doing, especially in times like these, always, is amplifying the thing that we want to be seeing less of. And there are many ways that we amplify things. One, we pay attention to it. So I want you to think for a moment about what it is that you are amplifying with your attention. What do you give your attention to And then what do you amplify with it? And I want you to notice the times when you get into a swirl, and it's the swirl that sounds like, what is wrong with these people? Now, maybe you're all more enlightened than I am, but I find myself in that swirl frequently. Okay, my best friend will call and we'll talk about what is wrong with these people, what is happening in this world, okay? And that is a swirl that we want to watch for. Normal, human, absolutely, we go there. But we want to know when it's happening so that we can step out of it. And every time that we find ourselves caught up in a what is wrong with swirl, we want to replace it with a what would help intention. Okay, it's a stepping stone. You'll start in who are, what is wrong with me, what is wrong with them. You'll always start there. That's what your protective system will do. Your protective system, when it perceives threat, when it is afraid, when it's objecting to something that it doesn't like in the world, it will instantly want to analyze what is wrong. And it is our deep task in these times to step out of that consciousness, to notice when it is arising, and to step into a higher consciousness, a proactive consciousness, a loving and humane consciousness. And I want to talk for a moment about what that actually means, because it doesn't mean going into denial about everything that is not going well in the world and only focusing on what is good. That's not what I'm talking about. There are other people who can talk about that. That's not what I'm going to talk about. What I'm going to talk about is the importance, the critical importance of being able to hold opposites and bridge polarities in these times from a place of humanity and kindness. So what I'm talking about is the importance of dropping our enemy images of one side over another side, but doing it in a way that doesn't numb us out or move us into repression, magical thinking, or denial about the very real issues that we are being called to face and address in our world, but to approach our response to those issues from a place in which we're not perpetuating the same kind of violence, judgment, shame, darkness, enemy images, fragmentation that brought us here to begin with. And one of the most powerful and simplest and most concrete ways that we can begin doing that is by harnessing the power of kindness. By asking yourself what it means to extend kindness to everything that you come across in the world. Because when we greet things we don't like with judgment, with shame, with violence, with anger, with reactivity, even though those are normal reactions and they're going to arise anyway, all I'm saying is when that happens, you see something you don't like and you feel this outrage. Okay, first, that's healthy. That's good. That tells you about something that matters to you. That tells you about something that you deeply love and that you care about and that you're willing to fight for. This is a good energy. But in its unfiltered form, as in the first 30 minutes, and maybe even in the first few days that it arises, if you unleash it without consciousness, without loving consciousness, if you just let it run through you, what'll happen is you'll simply recreate more of the very thing that you are objecting to. You will play a part in recreating the thing you're trying to transform because you haven't slowed down enough to metabolize that energy within you so that when you act, the action that you bring is inclusive of all people, is kind towards all people, is loving towards humanity, and is proactive and concretely helpful in bringing us together in a new way, which is what is needed. What is needed is the integration of opposites. And that's the higher the higher goal that I'm going to suggest you consider. So, quick story. I have a almost 17-year-old in my house who is absolutely outraged and developmentally appropriate in her very righteous side-picking identity development stage of knowing who she is and which side she's on. Okay, so at 17, this is a really powerful and important developmental stage, because part of being a teenager and a young adult is figuring out your sense of identity. It's figuring out who you are and what you stand for. And every person needs a solid, healthy sense of identity to ground themselves in. And ideally, all of us have been through this sense of like figuring out who we are and what we stand for and what we want to be for in the world. And we've developed a sense of identity. So I want to suggest to you, okay, so first my story is every time that she makes a very fragmented, dualistic comment about how this side is good and this side is bad and how she loves all these people and she hates all these people, my whole system cringes. Like I so badly want to start educating her. And I hold myself back because I trust the process of development, and I know that this is where she needs to be right now. And I trust that with time, she will evolve her sense of identity and her perspective into a more expanded way. And the more that I jump in there right now as mom, the more damage I'm going to do and the more entrenched she's going to get. Okay, I'm happy to answer any questions you have about that in a little bit. But I mention that because I want you to find that place inside of you where you want to take a side and you want to make another side wrong. And you want to decide, because all of us, every single one of us, believes that we are on the side of good. Okay, every one of us. We all think that we stand for the good people. And I want you to see that, regardless of what the actual ideology is behind that, that is your primary intention. And that's actually the vast majority of people's primary intention. And I want you to slow down for a moment and just recognize the beauty of that. That everybody at some level is trying to be a good person and is trying to stand on the ground and stand for what they see as good. And their sense of identity is wrapped up in that. And if your interventions, if the way that you interact with people in the world does not take that into consideration and does not honor that and work with people in their goodness, if you come in talking about how bad people are, what happens is everybody else's sense of identity, all of their protective mechanisms kick up, they get defensive, they get resistant, they see you as unsafe, they see you as the bad person that they need to fight against, and we simply keep recreating the very kind of interpersonal dynamics that got us here to begin with. So getting people entrenched in their sense of identity is problematic. So in your approach, when you come with kindness, when you come with curiosity, when you come with a sense of clarity and consciousness and compassion, that way of being will fundamentally shift the quality of the conversation regardless of the content. And that is your primary task, is to do the work inside of you to come from that place, so that when you do begin interacting with people around whatever it is that you're unhappy with, that you are leading with kindness, that you are leading with humanity, that you are coming into the conversation with a settled nervous system, okay? That you've done your own work in how you're showing up in public spaces. The other thing I want to say about identity is that when people grow, every time that you've made a quantum leap in your own life, in your own development, in your own sense of growth, every growth stage involves leaving behind an old identity and emerging into a new identity. And that can feel to us like we are letting go, like we're dying to our sense of self, like we're dying to a world that we knew. It's a very vulnerable thing to do. And yet, I can find inside of myself, I can remember a time when I was in high school and I was very, very involved in the church, and I was very, very evangelical and very conservative in many, many of my Christian beliefs. And then I began bumping up, right? As we all do. I began bumping up against contradictions and places where things just didn't fit and things just didn't make sense. And so much of me, that inner conflict, and I'm hoping that all of you can find a similar inner conflict in you, where you feel like the world as you have it constructed, your belief system, your way of operating in the world, the rules that you thought things worked by, begin to crumble. And I remember feeling like, I'm going to go to hell. I am going to be one of these wayward, lost people that's going to be like drifting off into the depths of the universe. And I'm going to be this lost, like this was all identity concerns, right? They have to do with who am I? And we can become very identified with our beliefs. So when you're talking to people about their belief systems, please keep in mind that you are talking to them about their sense of who they are. And when somebody is talking to you about your belief systems, watch for the part of you that is identified and believes that this is about who you are. And see if you can bring more kindness, more compassion, more space, more safety into that conversation. Because what I'm going to suggest we're really after, for those of us who are seekers and who are healers and who believe in the growth and development of the human species, what we're after is what is true. And what we're after is what works well for all people. And what we're looking for is universal principles. And when we remember that truth and love and universal principles transcend our ideologies, that they have a power of their own, that's what makes them true, we can stop getting so restricted over all of the little things that we've picked up from our cultures that may or may not be true. And we can get a little bit of distance from them and begin examining what is and isn't working in my psyche, in our culture, in the systems that we have created. And in order to get creative with that, we need to be disidentified from it. And what we need to be identified with instead is a universal set of values that we are working towards. This is making sense. I'm just sort of curious if people are with me, because it's hard when you don't see a whole room of people, if they've all sort of wandered off when you just see a bunch of blank screens. Okay, so in order to create conditions in which we can truly move forward together, one of your primary, most powerful tools is your ability to be kind to everybody. It is your ability to see the goodness in everybody. And that is not minimizing in any way the systematic injustice that we need to be confronting and dealing with. Okay, that is not turning a blind eye to the fact that the way that our systems are currently constructed, in a way they're designed to get people entrenched in a sense of identity and to then defend their subjective identity against everybody else. So when you've got people turning on one another, you've got nobody left changing the system. It's a very brilliant thing that the systems do. They don't want you seeing the systemic stuff, so they make the people focus on one another. And then we can be so busy judging one another that we miss the way in which we've all been set up. And so I'm going to invite you today to start seeing through those systems. Okay. So some things that I want to invite you to think about. It is very, very important to be resisting polarities. It is very, very important to understand that in some way, every perspective is right to some degree. Everything fits somewhere and somehow. One of the things that will support you in doing that is remembering that we all play all parts. And so here's what I mean by that. At a very deeply spiritual level, we are all one. We are one body. What happens out there in the world is also happening in here in my psyche. And what is happening in here in my psyche is also happening out there in the world. And so these things will reflect one another. Part of healing right now involves finding the part of myself that has my knee on someone's neck. It is about finding the part of myself that has a knee on her neck. It is about finding the part of myself that cannot breathe. It is also about finding the part of myself that is preventing somebody else from breathing. The deeply spiritual work is reclaiming and re-owning that we are all things, and being willing to have a look at every aspect of who we are. Not so that we can make ourselves wrong and blame and shame and figure out who to punish. This is old consciousness. We are doing away with old consciousness, but so that we can begin integrating opposites and bringing things back into balance so that things can begin, what's the word I'm looking for? Like getting back into integration with one another. And what do I mean by that? The way that a polarity works, it's a lot like breathing. You breathe out and then you breathe in, and then you breathe out and then you breathe in. If you're only ever doing one movement, you're gonna die. If the only thing you know how to do is breathe out, it's not life affirming. If you can only ever breathe in and hold your breath, it's not life affirming. Okay, so there is a contraction and an expansion, a contraction and an expansion. And what we want to learn how to do is be in the life energy, working with the process and the flow, and not being in resistance to it. And that means dropping the illusion that there are bad people out there and that there are good people out there, and that if we can just figure out who the bad people are and get rid of them, then the good people will remain and all of us will be okay. This is a massive illusion. There are humans out there, and we all need some help. We need help healing our wounds, waking up, healing our trauma, caring, deeply, deeply caring about one another's trauma, even if that is not ours, understanding that when something hurts you, it hurts me, even if I can't see that directly yet. Okay? And it means learning how to be with one another in a way that amplifies what we want to see more of. And so today I'm going to suggest that that means extending kindness wherever and whenever you can on a daily basis, and watching for the places in yourself where you feel like you can extend kindness to some people, but not other people. Okay, that would be your growth edge. So if you can make a list of all of the people that you just feel like you can't be kind towards in spirit, let's start with the easiest and the most profound one, which is in spirit. Can you be kind to Derek in spirit? Can you be kind to our president in spirit? If not, what is getting in your way? And that is really, really important work to do. And when I say what is getting in your way, my fear in saying that is this, and I want to make it explicit because this is not what I'm saying. Extending kindness to somebody does not condone the way that they are behaving that is inherently harmful to other people. Okay, so you've got to, you want to hold these things together. People who are, let's for argument's sake just say wounded and unconscious for right now. We'll just make it simple like that. People who are hurting and don't know that they're hurting, who are numbed out from themselves, can do incredibly harmful things to other people because they have a lack of self-connection, which means that they have no connection with one another. They have a lack of self-empathy, so they can't have empathy for other people. There is a certain degree of deadness going on the inside. Now, there are good reasons why that's there. We're not going to go into that today. However, who will we become while we have that kind of energy around us? Will we commit to staying loving, kind, conscious, humane? Will we commit to being the kind of people that we want to see more of in the world? Or in the face of this contrast, do we lose connection and go into fear and go into meeting them at the level and the energy that they are currently functioning at, because we think that that's the only way that we can stay safe? And I'm going to actually just leave that as a question for you to contemplate in your own lives. You, of course, draw all of your own conclusions based on your own belief systems and how and where you are in your journey. But for myself, I would love to inspire you to find a way of including everyone in your heart. Because when we set protective boundaries with other people from a place that is open-hearted and kind, we increase the possibility that healing can happen. And what we need more than anything on this planet is collective healing, collective coming together. And healing does involve acknowledging pain, preventing harm, seeing harm where it's being done, and having the courage and the ability to prevent it and stop it. And we can't possibly solve this on a global level if in our own daily lives, we don't yet know how to be kind to the cashier who's running, who's going very slowly, and all of our impatience comes up and all of our judgments come up, and we say some snide, snarky thing because we're in a hurry and the world isn't lining up the way that we wish it did today, and what is wrong with these people, and who are all these people in this world, and blah, 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 blah. When we go into this place of grandiosity and entitlement and superiority and impatience, maybe none of you do. I'm speaking mostly about myself today. Okay, take whatever works for you. But when I'm in those places, I've got to pause and ask myself, is this really who you want to be in the face of a hurting world, a fearful world, a violent world? And what is it that I can bring into every single moment that is going to change that tide? And that is what I'd like to inspire all of you to think a little bit about today. What is it that you can bring in the small details of your life that extends kindness? So I'm just going to check my notes. Yes, here, this is what I'm going to close with. And then what I think I'll do is I'll just open it up for some questions and some engagement and some, discussion with you. That would feel a lot richer to me. But here's really what I want to remind you of, inspire you, to remember. We need a world in which we are willing to soften, in which we need people to soften and melt and move into one another's pain and care about the impact that we're having on each other. If we don't get there, we're going to get more of the same. We're going to get more division, more polarity, more fragmentation, more defensiveness, more resistance, more escalation, and more violence. That's where that goes. People get violent when they're afraid and they don't see other options, and their needs are not met and they don't see other options. Makes sense. So we want to take a bunch of steps back and figure out, how are we meeting our needs and others' needs to be seen, to be heard, to matter, to have their perspectives included, to be treated with dignity, to be treated with respect, to be treated with kindness. How are we creating those conditions? And forget politics. Have a look at your own family of origin. That's where my hardest work is having a look at the people I grew up with. Like, that's really I'd rather take on some politicians some days than some of the people in my direct family. But that's really where my circle of influence is, and that's really my stretch zone. And I'm going to step up to that. Am I really going to step up and be kind and loving and live into my values there, where it really matters? Or am I going to keep distracting myself with these other more ideological and mental and not so direct things and tell myself that I'm making a difference? So that's something to think about. We need less sharpness. We need less stridency. We need less impatience. We need less rigidity. We need less bracing against. We need less polarizing. And the way that we get there is by doing the work in our own hearts first. All right, I have a couple of things that I wanted to tell you, just because I decided that you may know all of these things, but I'm going to remind you about kindness. When you do something kind for somebody else, it boosts your serotonin. Okay, the serotonin is and your dopamine. Okay, both feel good chemicals in your brain. You have more sense of satisfaction. You have more sense of well-being. And you also, when you do kind things for other people, and even when you witness or hear stories about other people doing kind things for one another, it also releases oxytocin. And oxytocin, I'm sure you all know, is a bonding hormone. Okay, it's the hormone that is pro-social, and it creates connections and bonding between two people. It is also what we think of as cardioprotective, because it reduces inflammation and it reduces blood pressure. So if we could just start giving ourselves a daily dose of kindness and everybody else around us a daily dose of kindness, it would go a very, very long way to building some resiliency, given the tasks, the very, very important systemic change tasks that are in front of so many of us today. And I'm going to end with this: it's contagious. The more you do it, the more you will inspire other people to do it. So I'm going to pause there. I want to find out if people have anything they want to write in the chat, anything you want to ask, anything you want to object to. I'm just going to invite you to share with me where you're at, hearing some of these thoughts and ideas this morning. What would you like to build on or ask?
Did you see in chat I sent on the one from Ella for you?
I'll look at it right now. Tips for controlling emotions which override our best impulses. That's a lovely question. Okay. All right. We don't want to control our emotions. We want to contain our emotions. Here's the difference. When we focus on controlling our emotions, what we often end up doing is repressing and suppressing them and sending them into a shadow, a disowned part. We end up seeing that emotion as bad, and we don't know how to stay in relationship with it. And what's actually really, really important for health and well-being is to stay in relationship with an emotion and allow it to move through you, but not to act on the emotion impulsively. So tips for that, just now that I've made that distinction. You want to develop the ability to, and this is like mindfulness practice, right? You want to develop the ability to be able to witness your emotional states without going into the impulse that you have to get rid of the emotion instantly because you can't tolerate it. Okay, so you will want to control, disown your emotions to the degree that you haven't got the muscles to tolerate your emotions. And so if I just were to give you like human 101 curriculum, things that people need to learn how to do, we need to know how to feel our feelings and tolerate our feelings, track them in our body, and follow them to completion. And as we're doing that, we need to be kind and gentle with ourselves. We need a lot of empathy from ourselves and others. And we need to be asking all the way through, what is deeply important to me here? What is this emotion trying to tell me is deeply, deeply important to me? Because your emotions tell you about two things happening. They tell you about how you have been trained to perceive something, and you need to do some work with your perceptual system. And they also tell you about a deep universal human need that is likely unmet. And that universal human need is something that you will share with all other people, like safety, my need for safety. My fear and my anger has to do with safety. And before you act, you get into a place where you want safety for all people. When you commit to having that need met for all people, your next action will be wiser. It will be more inclusive. It will be more expansive. It will be more life-affirming when you can want it for all people than when you only want it for you in that moment. When you only want it for you in that moment, your reactivity to your feelings becomes very often, more often than not, self-sabotaging, because you end up creating the same condition over and over and you get stuck in the same loop. I'm wondering if that is concrete enough or not.
I think it helps, but
Say more.
so what I'm hearing from me personally, what I can take away from this is in those split second moments when I'm triggered, and really have a powerful negative emotion, see if I can detach a bit from it.
Yes, thank you. Let me say a few more things. When I have a powerful emotion, feel it, honor it. What is happening for me here? Let myself know. If I'm angry, it's because I have boundaries, and because I have values, and because I have a vision that isn't being met. If I'm heartbroken, I need grieving. I need time to metabolize sadness. I need time for loss. If I'm indignant, it's because I so badly want something to be in the world that would be better for all people. Like, I get a little like, I just want to really be the voice of, don't make your feelings go away. Your feelings will go away naturally when you've harvested the data that they're here to give you. So honor them, like know that they're here for a good reason. If we can stop thinking about feelings as good ones or bad ones, right? I mean, some of them are just more unpleasant, honestly. They're very unpleasant, they're painful to be feeling. And so there's some like sort of a spiritual attitude toward that I would just say, welcome everything. Like welcome the pain, welcome the outrage, welcome the indignation. Not that it's supposed to be or not supposed to be, but take it more like data about what is my next step to make a world that works for all people, and where is my circle of influence that I have direct action in for that. Is that helpful, Ella, or not?
Yes, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. The reason that I harp on this point a little bit is because there is a history of oppressing feelings. There is a history of oppressing life energy. And so, you know, when we want people to start expressing it appropriately, or to make that pesky feeling, it's too intense, it's not appropriate. Like there's lots of ways in which we use emotion, the suppression of emotion, to suppress groups of people and to suppress values. And so I want to name that and just say, working with our emotions is not the same as controlling, oppressing, suppressing, getting rid of. We want to learn how to work with them, not against them. So, okay. Then there's another question. Should we move away from people with personal and political views that we do not agree with, or to try to explain to them why we think what we do think? Okay, beautiful question. I can't answer that for you, but I'm going to give you some guidelines on what I would suggest. Remember that you're going to have your three circles, the green zone people in the middle, the people that you're super comfortable with, who are just like you, and you feel like you can have safe and engaged conversations. And then you're going to have this like zone around that group, where these are the people that are a little bit more in your stretch zone. They stretch you, you get a little bit triggered, but you don't get like completely reactive. But then there's going to be a whole group of people and topics and situations out here that are a little bit beyond your capacity. Okay, they're kind of like high stakes, but also high triggering. And in those situations, in those conversations, it's much harder for you to stay grounded. You get incredibly triggered, you get super reactive. So what I would do is I would say, find out where you are on the continuum and make a commitment to staying in your stretch zone, so that you can develop the capacity for your stretch zone to keep inching outward more and more towards the people who are currently beyond your capacity. So sometimes it is better to choose not to have a conversation. If I know that I'm going to show up reactive and angry and I'm going to make things worse, it's better to not have that conversation until I am more grounded, more resourced, more skillful, more conscious. And that means doing more of my own work before I'm going to take that one on. But it's not as simple as, well, do I make myself uncomfortable or not? I would say yes. We want to inspire ourselves to always go for whatever is your next courageous step. And that courageous step for you needs to be aligned with what you are working for in the world. So there is a tragic gap. Parker Palmer talks about this tragic gap between who we are at the moment, our current state, our current capacity, what we're able to do right now. And then we have this vision of what this relationship could be like, what this world could be like, what our political system could be like, what the police force could be like, what an inclusive culture that treats everybody with dignity looks like. We have this vision of what the world could be. And in between this vision and our current state, there is a gap. And how we fill that gap, how we relate with that gap is critically important. And what I would say is you've got to greet that gap with kindness, with compassion, with empathy, with softness. That's where miracles can happen. That's the place where healing and softness and change and growth can happen. Anything that comes with reactivity and violence will simply put people, make people resistant, more of the very thing that you don't want, less open, more bracing, more resistant, more aggressive. So in many ways, this is about what do you do with that tragic gap, and are you willing to be uncomfortable? And the only times you're going to be willing to be uncomfortable is when you've got a higher value that you're willing to be uncomfortable for. So I'm going to challenge you to sit down this Sunday and make a list of what are you willing to be uncomfortable for, and are you willing to treat yourself with kindness and dignity and compassion as you stretch on that journey without flooding yourself. If you flood yourself, it doesn't do anybody any good. And if you just stay in a little bubble and your own echo chamber, it's also not doing anyone, including yourself, any good. So I'm hoping that addresses that.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, go ahead. Do you want to say something? Yeah.
No, thank you. That's a good thing to remember.
Great. If I didn't get at what you were exactly asking, feel free to refine the question. And
no, that's the question.
Okay, awesome. So when you say you are whatever is in the outside world, does that mean you are a pedophile too? That sounds like very flawed logic. Yes, just thinking about this idea. So that's a very complex and beautiful question. I would love you to keep sitting with that. What I would say is, oh, I wish we had more time to go into it because this question actually has a lot in it. So my quick answer is, it doesn't mean that you are behaving like a pedophile as well and that you should be identified with every identity factor. That's not exactly what I'm saying. But what I am saying is, there will be a part of you, there will be a part of every human being that sometimes has inappropriate thoughts about boundaries that we would want to cross, that might harm somebody else. But because we have self-interest, we minimize our awareness of the impact on the other person, and we invade the boundary anyway because of selfish interest. That part, you'll find places in your life where you have a part like that. Now, how it actually gets expressed may look different in different lives, but part of becoming whole and part of becoming really clear and part of undoing your own triggers and your own shame is about being able to find, sorry, that's my cat, being able to find the humanity in every impulse that is out there, being able to take a step back and find the universal human impulse underneath that, which you may work with differently, but that you can extend a sense of shared humanity. Because if you're unable to find the sense of shared humanity, you will have disowned parts that will frame up your own identity system and will continue to, how can I put this, perpetuate the idea that these are the bad people and these are the good people. And there's there's millions of people who are bought into that idea and who believe that. And if you're there, I'm gonna leave you alone and say, be there, be wherever you need to be. I see it differently. I see the human evolutionary process as dropping all of our false selves, dropping all of our personas. And that means being able to find everything in me that I might be ashamed of, that I might want to hide, that I might not be able to own, that I might get defensive around, that I might get reactive around, and have that fully integrated in my sense of self so that I have sovereignty over it, and it does not have sovereignty over me. And to the degree that I'm unwilling to see it, it will work in the underground and have sovereignty over me in some aspect of my life, and I don't want that. Because I actually think that's where the real danger is. It's in the secrecy, it's in the hiding, it's in the not being able to talk about things. It's in the not being able to bring the fullness of human experience into the light and to greet it with love. That's where it continues to breed. So there's much more we could say. It's a really complex topic, and I would just encourage you to not push yourself anywhere that you don't want to go, and keep asking all of the really creative and critical questions that will lead you to your own answers, and trust those. All right, so it's 11:25. There's one more question. When evolving into a new stage of life, changing, leaving another belief system behind, how does one prevent the feelings of guilt? Okay, guilt comes from you believing that there is something wrong with you. Okay, there's nothing wrong with you. You are growing, you are learning. If you can think about yourself as having capacity, and it's limited, and then it increases and it increases and it increases, like an oak tree. It grows and grows, and you transcend and you include every previous stage. That doesn't make a previous stage bad or wrong, and it doesn't mean you can bypass any of the stages, okay? So I'm going to go back to my 17-year-old. She is in a stage of development. I don't want her to bypass it. I may be in a hurry for her to get to this other place where I think is better, but I also have wisdom to know that we need to integrate the learnings of each stage, and we cannot rush people through them or bypass any of them. So as we greet one another and ourselves with wherever we are at, I'm going to say it again, we greet each other with kindness, because kindness comes from the wisdom of knowing that we are all on a path and a journey, and that every stage is necessary and good, and that if we can continue to bring openness and softness and relationality and compassion, then people will find whatever their next step is. And we need to stop trying to transpose one right answer onto everybody else, and to try and get everybody in one stage of development, which will never ever happen. It will never happen. We're all at different stages, and the question is much more about how we relate with one another as we are imperfect and actually completely whole along the way. The guilt pieces, I would have you just remember, you are good enough as you are, wherever you are, and there is always a next step. So you greet yourself with tremendous self-compassion in the moment, acknowledging that wherever you are right now is exactly where you need to be. And then what is your one next step towards whatever vision is meaningful to you, and then make peace with that gap, okay? Guilt comes from an all-domination system of turning on yourself, because if you turn on yourself, you'll never see through the system. And if you turn on other people, you'll never see through the system. And it's really, really important in these times for us to begin not turning on ourselves, not turning on one another, and really beginning to see through the system, so that we can start having like massive, effective, life-affirming changes. So that's where I'm going to end today. Thank you, thank you, thank you for having me here, and letting me sort of just talk. Please take whatever is resonating with you. Anything that I said that doesn't fit for you, throw it away. You do not have to agree or believe everything that I'm saying. I am not like the expert. Take what works, go forth and be super, super kind, first to yourself and then to anybody that you interact with, and go make the world a better place. So thank you for being here today.